Aphria stock has plunged lately to levels we haven't seen since 2016, and this stock is really all over the news for the wrong reasons. The stock went from a high of $20 per share on the TSX earlier this year to now a low of below $4 per share. So what caused this drop, and does this mean it's time to buy some Aphria stock, or maybe is it time to sell out of Aphria stock? Well, I'm going to let you guys know in this video what my position is on Aphria and what I'll be doing as well. So stick around, let's go through some of these reasons and figure out what really happened with this company. Let's go. Hey guys, if you're new here, make sure to subscribe down below. If you enjoy these kind of videos where I talk about these popular, really volatile stocks, let me know in the comment section down below and I can make tons of videos like this. But either way, let's get into it. Drop a huge like as well. And now let's talk Aphria. So a company or a research firm called Hindenburg Research came out a few days ago earlier this week, and they pretty much had a pretty detailed report on why they think that Aphria as a company is completely a fraud, completely a scam, and it's actually designed to steal investors' money and fail in the long run. So what we'll do is we'll go through this accusation by this research firm and kind of dissect the points that they make and see if it actually holds any ground and if we should be concerned as investors. A lot of people, including myself, have been an Aphria bull for quite a while, and I'm actually a shareholder in Aphria as well if you weren't aware of that. So I'm curious myself to see what this report's about, whether we should pay attention to this report, and maybe if it's time to actually exit this company because of this report. So the highlight here is that they believe, quote, Aphria is part of a scheme orchestrated by a network of insiders to divert funds away from shareholders into their own pockets. So that's a really bold statement coming here out of this research firm. And if this does hold true, the insiders at Aphria are going to be facing some pretty large lawsuits in the next few months. So one of the biggest red flags here, and kind of the whole premise of this article, was centered around Aphria's recent acquisition in Latin America for around $300 million in a few different countries, where they took over some property and they actually expanded, apparently, their processes out there. So as you can see here, Hindenburg says that their on-the-ground research shows that the transactions appear to be largely worthless, and that the official registered office of Aphria's $145 million Jamaican acquisition is an abandoned building that was sold off by the bank earlier this year. Another claim here was that their $50 million Argentine acquisition publicly boasted sales of US $11 million in 2017, but a worker from here actually came out and said that in 2017 the revenue was actually more like $430,000 US. So that right there is a large discrepancy, so we need to dig further in here. So what the reporter did was they actually flew out to Jamaica and they visited these areas where Aphria supposedly purchased these properties or purchased these companies, and they wanted to see for themselves if this was actually legit or not. So as you can see from the pictures they took here, things aren't looking that great. If you look, you can see that it's just an old abandoned building that is completely falling apart and isn't really much of an investment per se. And the funny part is that this is supposed to be the official Jamaican office of Aphria now. Now this is just one of 3 properties that they looked at. We can see here that the second property was one where they actually didn't even have a unit that existed. So Aphria claimed to occupy unit 51 in this complex, but according to the landlord of this whole complex, they said that unit 51 does not exist and the land only goes up to unit 50. Now this, I would say, is an even bigger red flag than the first one, because they don't even own something here supposedly. They own a fictional unit which doesn't even exist. Now the third property was also questionable, but I would say it's the most legit out of the 3, funny enough. And as you can see here from the screenshot, they didn't really have a proper plaque or anything on the door, just a regular paper label, and this is supposedly one of their main offices as well, which doesn't appear to be used. Now in my opinion, out of the 3, this is the biggest stretch from this report. I don't think that this cannot be an office. It could very well be an office. It looks like a regular office building. These marijuana companies aren't necessarily massive multi-billion-dollar companies yet, even though their market caps might reflect that. They're not bringing in that much money, so they can't really afford massive properties and good-looking offices. So it is possible that this is a legit office of Aphria's. That being said though, I would say the first 2 properties do raise red flags, especially the second one, which doesn't seem to exist, and of course the first one, which looks like an abandoned warehouse. But again, maybe the reporter got this address wrong, but from what it seems like, they did their research and they did come up with the proper address here. There's also a few more concerns that they brought up in this report that I'd like to quickly go over here. So the plot of land that they purchased is not approved to grow cannabis currently, and this is a concern. And the second main thing I would say is that they only have a conditional license currently, which they're waiting on approval for, so they could potentially get rejected for this application that they have in. So this is not what investors want to hear. This is not what they've led investors to believe up until this point. So this could be one of the main triggers for the sell-off that we've seen over the last few days. Now, this story that we kind of covered here in Jamaica is pretty much a very similar thing that's going on in Colombia and Argentina for different offices that they purchased there as well. So I'm not going to bore you guys with the details, but it is important to understand that this expands outside of just Jamaica. It is also in Latin America. The next big thing I do want to point out here though is that documents show that Aphria insiders were likely undisclosed beneficiaries of these deals. We noticed that what appear to be systematic attempts to hide the true nature of these transactions. So this again is another huge accusation because now the short sellers here are going after Aphria's insiders specifically. And the insider that they're going after in this report is a guy named Andy DeFrancisco. The claim here, as you can see, is that DeFrancisco's private equity firm, the Delvaco Group, was the advisor in Aphria's reverse merger into a shell entity named Black Sparrow Capital Corp. And this was the specific transaction that took Aphria public. The short sellers here also believe that DeFrancisco played an integral role with Aphria, Scythian, and the LATAM transactions, and that they view him as the architect of these questionable transactions. So this again raises concerns because now if this guy's involved in the company and he's the one who's being accused of it, not only is it going to look bad for Aphria because they work with this guy, but it's also going to hurt his reputation and his brand and his company as well. So it's kind of a whole negative ball of just lies just coming together, and it seems to be a lot going on here behind the scenes that investors don't know, and a lot of it is coming out from this report. Now, the final claim that came out of this report was that Aphria's quality of cannabis was low quality or low grade. Now, in my opinion, I would say this is kind of a subjective claim, but let's take a look here at what they said. So we can see that they believe that, quote, Aphria's cannabis seems to be of low quality. Interviews with sources describe facilities infested with bugs, stricken with mold, and having failed audit inspections. Now, this fact right here, I believe, is just kind of a shot in the dark. They don't really have any concrete evidence behind this. It's just from a source, from someone that they heard. So I would really take this one with too much of a grain of salt. I would just kind of be like, okay, well, it's something to consider, but I wouldn't necessarily make a decision based solely on this until there's some concrete evidence that they failed inspections or there are some insects, bugs, mold, whatever it is, in their production facilities. We also have to note that in 2017, Aphria did sign a large deal with a Canadian company called Shoppers, where they will be kind of the official licensed distributor for Shoppers. So it'll be really interesting to see if this whole accusation and this report that came out actually jeopardizes the deal between Aphria and Shoppers. If there is news that comes out that Shoppers is considering breaking this deal, canceling the contract, I would not be surprised if Aphria stock dropped another 20, 30% or even more. And if that does happen, unfortunately, at that point, I would say that Aphria is a sinking ship, and I personally would consider pulling money out of that investment. You have to remember that the competition in this space is heating up, so if Aphria loses this deal, one of the other companies stands to benefit from that deal. Maybe it's Canopy, maybe it's Aurora. You never know what company it is, but there is a lot of companies out there that would benefit if Aphria did lose this deal. So if you are currently an Aphria shareholder like myself, I would say that this is kind of the reality of the situation. These are the cards that we've been dealt. This is the report that came out, and I presented you with the facts and the information from this report. Now at this point, it's your decision as to how you want to proceed, whether you want to maybe add more shares, maybe you want to close out your position, maybe you want to wait and see if that Shoppers deal does have any jeopardy of, breaking or falling through. In which case, I would personally look into selling. But if that doesn't happen and the deal still continues, maybe Aphria comes out and defends themselves and it's solid defense that they produce that investors believe, then maybe we'll see the stock price back up above $10 a share, maybe even $15, $20 per share in the next year or so. But me personally, I'm holding on to this position. I bought this position with the intention to hold this until retirement, so at least another 30, 40 years, whatever it may be. So I don't really care about this short-term noise that's been going on, unless there is some sort of significant, downside with the Shoppers deal, like I said. If that does break, I will most likely sell out of this position. If that doesn't break, however, I will just continue to hold. It doesn't really matter to me if the stock continues at $4 or $5 a share on the TSX for the next little while, because over the long run, I do believe that it will recover and they will establish themselves as one of the top producers of marijuana. It is a very speculative position in my portfolio, so it doesn't really affect my portfolio that much. Stock price goes up or down, so that's why I don't really mind holding it in there, because I don't really check it that often either. Anyways guys, hope you enjoyed this. This was requested by quite a few of you, and a lot of you are invested in this space. So I hope this kind of gives you a better understanding of what happened, why the stock dropped, and maybe this gives you better insight as to why you should pick up shares in the company. Maybe you believe that this report is completely fictional, doesn't really make any sense. Either way, I will leave a link to the report in the description if you want to read more detail on that. There's a lot more detail that they have, so you can check that out for yourself if you wanted to. But either way guys, hope you enjoyed this. Don't forget to invest positively, and I'll see you in the next one.